Okay, in this tutorial we're going to take the animation that the character has, we're going to cut it up into small clips, and then we're going to clean each clip. There's obviously no point in cleaning the entire sequence if you're not going to use it all, so we'll only take out the bits which interest us. So first of all, let's have a look through the animation. So I think what we'll do is we will do this twirl movement as a clip. So from here, we want to start and finish, spin it around a bit, we want to start and finish with a fairly neutral pose, or have a bit of lead in and lead out to each movement that we record. So starting somewhere about here, having the twirl, and then allowing both feet to come back together, probably about there. So from here, we're going to do from 365, so over here I'm going to put in 365, and then from there up to 445. Okay, so that now fully defines the clip that we're going to do. Just have a watch of that. So let's come back to the beginning. Now there's three types of cleanup that you'll normally want to do on Mocap data. One is a kind of body adjustment. So you can see at the moment she's leaning a bit forwards. One of the feet is turned up. And most importantly, if I just go to models only, you can see that her hands are inside her body. Now that was probably due to a bad calibration pose when we did the Mocap. But the better the Mocap session, the less cleanup you should have to do. But it's a good example for us because it shows us how we can do the first kind of cleanup, which is posture adjustment. So all the cleanup done in Mocap is going to be done in layers, animation layers. Now if you look at the hip bone that I selected there, you can see there's a keyframe on every frame on the Mocap data. It's impossible to edit on its own. So we create a new layer above that by clicking this button down here for new layer, and we get a completely fresh timeline, which is basically going to add on to the base animation. So we can actually use this very simply to adjust our character. Now I'm going to go into full body key mode. The three key modes there: full body, body part, and selection. Full body means that when I set a key, it's going to set a key for the entire body, which is what we want in this particular scenario. I'm just going to rename this layer as well. Rename posture adjust. So I'm going to start with the feet, I think. We get it down so we can actually see the floor level, and you can see that the feet are actually floating above the floor. So first of all, in order to set the feet up and get them right, I'm actually going to lower her pelvis by quite a lot to allow us just to fiddle around with the feet, and then I will lift her pelvis back up again. So I'm going to pull that down to the ground so there's quite a lot of bend in the knee, and it will enable us to move the feet around. So let's just focus in on the feet again, and I'm going to choose each foot in turn, and I'm going to pull it downwards until it's about at floor level. I'm also going to rotate it. Now notice that I'm pulling it downwards in the global Y direction because that is down, but for other adjustments I'm going to switch from global to local, and if I do the rotation now, you can set up the angle of the foot so it's a little bit more natural. Okay. That's good. Go back to move and go back to global so I can move it straight up and down. And just make sure that it's on the floor and not part way through the floor. Okay, so that's better. Same on the other foot. If you accidentally select something, just double click off it to deselect it. So the other foot is floating a bit. Let's put it down to level. I'll do some rotations on it in the local axis. Yeah, that's okay. Go back to move and global and just lift up the pelvis until her legs straighten up. Again, that's about as high as I can go. So one leg is straight and the other leg is bent, but that's absolutely fine. Other adjustments while I'm at the pelvis, you can see she's leaning forward slightly. So I'm going to do move, but in the local direction there, just so I can move her backwards to make her slightly more upright. And what I would be trying to do on this, if I was doing this properly, is I'd actually be comparing this to the video reference that I took when I did the motion capture to make sure that the posture I'm creating here is similar to the posture that she had when she actually recorded it. I'm just going to move the legs a bit further apart. That means I need to move the pelvis down again so that the legs are in touch with the floor. Okay, she's still leaning forward, so I'm just going to rotate her pelvis back a little bit. Like that, to give her a more upright appearance. So, I also need to grab the shoulders and rotate them so that the arms are not embedded in the thigh. Yeah, there's just a little gap between the two there. There we go. Okay. Think. Just need to move that forward very slightly. There we go. Now, that is my interpretation of how she should be standing at that point. Like I say, it should be based on video reference. In an ideal situation, you'd actually have a good neutral pose recorded into your Mocap data so that you can actually align the feet up and be confident that they should both be facing forward, make sure the head's facing forward and so on, because at the moment I don't know if her head was meant to be facing forward or if it was meant to be at an angle like it is, but that's fine. So I've got that there. Just select any one part, and because I'm in full body key mode, I just click the key button here and it'll lay down a keyframe on the whole thing. So let's just go to models only so I can watch this animation. And if I do layout preview, it means I can get a full screen version of the animation to watch and make a bit more, make it a bit easier to see what's going on and play that through. Okay, so the posture looks a little bit more natural now. And that is posture adjustment. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do an instantaneous cleanup. So if we go right to the end of this particular sequence, there's a point just about here, just off camera, let me spin that round, where her left arm goes through her hips, just there. So obviously we need to fix that as well. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to fix the arm into a new position for the entire animation. So we're just going to adjust it just for that moment as it goes through there. and then we'll put it back to the normal mocap data. So I'm just going to add in a new layer here. I'm going to rename it arm intersection. And if you've got a long sequence, you might have a layer in there, which is one layer where you fix all of the arm intersections throughout the sequence. So what I'm going to do now, in order to make this work, we go backwards and forwards through the mocap data, and we're looking for the extreme poses of that arm. So if I go back to the point where that arm is in an extreme pose, probably about there, maybe a bit closer. No, about there would be nice. Okay, I'm going to put a keyframe here on this layer just to lock that position in. And if I set a key now, if I select some parts of the object, I'm going to select the shoulder, and I'm going to go on to body part mode because I only want to set a key for the arm at this particular point. And you can see what it's going to set keys on, because if you look over here, this bit here, the whole arm, has now got white outlines. If we go to full body mode, the whole thing's got white outlines. So if I just go to arm, we know it's going to set the shoulder, the elbow, the hand positions as it goes through. So setting a key there will lock that position in, and what that's effectively doing is this key will just have a value of 0 on this layer here. I'm going to go through to the next extreme on the opposite side of the error, which is actually the last frame of the thing on this particular sequence. I'm going to put another key in there, another 0 key. So neither of those keyframes change the motion at all. So what I can guarantee is that every point up to this keyframe here is going to be exactly the same as the motion capture. And then when I get back to the end, it's going to be exactly the same as the motion capture. It's the bit in the middle I'm interested in. So I'm going to go back to the point, and I'll just toggle through the view modes with Control A. Just going to go to the point where the hand is at its worst intersection, which I think is probably this one. And then we just rearrange that particular arm pose to something that looks equally natural, but is not intersecting. So the obvious thing to do is just to rotate the shoulder out a little bit. Looks a little bit unnatural. Oops. So I'm just going to pull it round a bit like that and lift it out some more that way. And pull it round there, I think. Slightly more out. Okay, so that's obviously now going to bypass the hip. So I'll just put down a key for that. Bear in mind it's only going to keyframe the arm. So now as I go through that sequence, let's just go back to models only again, Control A. Go back through that sequence, you can see the mocap's exactly the same up to there, and it goes past missing the hip and then comes back into the position that the mocap data left in. A little bit of movement there as well. So in fact, I'll just go back to this keyframe here. Just going to, well, now I rotated it the other way just now, just going to rotate it that way slightly. Set that key again, just to make sure it's fine throughout the whole thing. What you want to try and avoid doing is putting lots and lots of keyframes in. So where I had another error there, I didn't want to put another keyframe in right next to it. I wanted to keep the keyframes as sparse as possible. And this is to keep it looking like motion capture data. If you put in lots of keyframes, all that's going to happen is it's going to look like keyframe animation. And that's obviously not the objective here. So that's an instantaneous correction. Right, so the next kind of cleanup that you need to look at is to stop feet skating. So if I go through and we look at the feet while this character dances, there's a few issues there, for example, where the foot's at a funny angle, but you can use an instantaneous adjustment there just to correct that foot back into the right position. But there's a position here, if we look here at the right foot, as we go through this point here, the right foot actually slides along the floor. before it takes off again. So what we need to do is we need to fix that so that it stays firmly planted on the floor. And this is how you correct foot skating. So let's get the rig back up, Control A again. I'm going to select the foot bone here. And I'm going to go on to the F curves for that object. We're talking about movement, and we're talking about the X and the Z movement, but let's just select all of the translation ones here. Already zoomed in on the area that's in question here, and you can see the Y is a little bit up and downy, but that's okay. It doesn't matter too much if you get a little bit of bounce in the foot every now and again. So let's just turn the Y off, Control there. So I'm just going to go through the X and the Z directions, and we can see that from the moment the foot plants, which is about there, which is frame 415, all the way through to the point where the foot leaves, which is there, 425. You can see that little section there isn't horizontal, it's climbing up, and down here it's climbing down. So the value is actually changing for X and Z in those two positions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all of the keyframes from the motion capture data between 415 and 425, like so. Just press delete. And now I've got what is more like a straight line. Now it's still on a slope, but the point is I've taken out any little sort of wobbly parts to the movement, and you can see that it still moves, but now it moves in a very smooth manner from one side to the next. Okay, now this is fairly easy to fix. What we need to do is we need to create a new layer, and we're going to use the layer to cancel out that bit of a movement there. Before I do it, I'm just going to select those keyframes at the beginning and the end, and I'm going to set the tangents to linear, and that just ensures that that is a nice straight line in between those two keyframes there. So go to a new layer, and this layer I'm going to call foot skating, and then I'm going to put a keyframe at this point. Look in a keyframe there on body part, good, yeah. Keyframe on that point, and then I'm going to go to frame 425, and I'm going to move it back I think the weight's on her heel, so I'm actually looking to try and get the heel in the same place. There we go. You can see that straight away is a lot better. I'm just going to put these two to linear as well, so that they exactly cancel out the ones on the other layer, and see what that looks like. And that's how you correct foot skating. Now you'll notice it's still not perfect. None of these adjustments are ever perfect, but you want to be careful not to over clean and spend too much time fixing things which the viewer is never going to see. So I can see this now, and I could spend hours perfecting that, getting the position exactly right, all this kind of stuff. But when you watch it from the camera viewpoint at the correct speed, camera's going to be there. Go into preview, Control A to look at models only, and play it through. And you can see that it's barely noticeable. In fact, most people are going to be looking at her head anyway, because that's where people are drawn to. So you need to clean it, but you don't need to clean it to perfection. So the only thing remaining now is to plot the animation from the control rig back onto the skeleton, and then we'll delete the control rig, and that will make this a clip completely ready to go into story mode. We need to do this for each clip that we're going to use in our sequence. So let's go down here, choose dancer character. We go on to character settings. We're going to plot character to the skeleton. Make sure it's 25 FPS again there, and click plot. So now the animation is on the skeleton. Now this is just one layer now, it's baked it out. So we've got the base animation layer there. Let's look at the F curves. So there are the F curves. If I go on to the other layers, they're completely empty. So we've plotted it onto the skeleton. We need to delete the control rig now. So we just go into control rigs, click dancer and delete. And then we do file, save as, and we call it dancer twirl cleaned. And once you've created a bunch of clips like this, the next stage is to bring them into the story window to blend them together to create a new sequence. And that's what we'll be doing in the next tutorial.